Hello, dudes, dudettes, duders, and everyone in between, and welcome to Uncut Gems, the video series where we take a good, long look at equipment and workflow and understand how it all ties together to create a single packaged product. Today, we are going to be looking at the ATEM Mini Pro and how to do that workflow. So we've got one set up and we've got 4 angles picked out. Angle number 1 is your hero shot. That's me, baby. Angle number 2 is the actual ATEM Mini Pro, and we'll be taking a look at the button functionality and just how GD bright these buttons are. They really are that bright. They really are that hard to film. If you've watched other reviews of the ATEM Mini, you already know. Camera number 3 is our wide shot showing the entire setup that we're doing, and feed number 4 comes directly from the computer, and it is the ATEM Mini Pro software controls. Now, from the computer, you can load up whatever you want. You could be running YouTube videos. You could do literally anything that you can get out of an HDMI from your computer. You could use as a feed for the ATEM. We're using the software controller because that's the most relevant. I mean, yeah, I could load up some music videos on YouTube, but that wouldn't really help the tutorial, would it? So what are we going over today? We're going to be going over the basic workflow of the ATEM Mini, and that workflow will include what you can do with the hardware alone and what you need to plug it into the software to do. We'll talk about how you kind of set up your ATEM Mini Pro and your workflow, and we'll talk about some of the bonus extra wonderful things about it and any of the shortcomings that I've discovered using it for the past couple of days. I've been using it for multicam podcasting, doing video editions of the podcasts we were already recording, and been refining the workflow over the last week, and I think we got something pretty good. So let's jump right into it, what the device does and how you can get it to do the best things that it can. So we're going to pop on over to the actual ATEM and talk about what we are feeding into the camera. So from left to right, we've got 2 audio feeds. We're only using one right now because it's a single mic. I don't need multiple audio for this. And that audio is coming from the line out of the Zoom that's right over there. You can see that this one is switched to on. That's because we are using the audio from the Zoom, and mic feed 2 is switched to off. So you've got your on. If I were to press off, you wouldn't be able to hear me. And then you have volume controls up and down. Very, very easy to use, very convenient. If you tap it, it'll go 3 decibels up or 3 decibels down, but you can hold it and fine tune it with more finesse than 3 decibel intervals. Moving down from left to right, we've got camera 1, 2, 3, 4. Camera 2 is engaged right now. That's the little GoPro. Hi, little GoPro. And you'll notice from left to right, we have audio off, audio off, audio off, and I keep the audio on for the laptop feed because if we were watching music videos on YouTube, you'd want to hear them as well as see them. AFV means audio follows video, so if you turn that on, when the camera is engaged, the audio will turn on, and when the camera is disengaged, the audio will turn off. Now, like I said, I'm using the audio from the Zoom, so I just leave camera audio off because, you know, nothing can compete with what's coming out of this Zoom. No GoPro built-in microphone that's halfway across the room will sound better than the actual Zoom microphone. And again, you've got on, off, and your volume up and down controls here. Very, very simple stuff. Like if you don't have the introduction, it can be a little confusing and a little overwhelming to begin with, but once you have the introduction, it's really intuitive, really simple to use. Of course, you've also got black, no picture. We'll go back to picture 2, and you've got stills. I don't have any stills loaded in, so when you go to still, it just goes to black. Moving over, you've got cut, which is what we have it left to. So as I push the buttons, we'll just do a straight cut. And you've got your different types of transitions. So we're going to turn on transitions, and you'll see when you push the button, it will crossfade between them. Woo, isn't that sexy? And if you watch, you can see the crossfade in the software going up and down and up and down. Wild stuff. Of course, you don't just have the crossfade. You've also got these different kinds of transitions. So there's a wipe. There's a vertical wipe. Move the card to the side, and this goofy little squishy thing, which I don't know. Like, I guess somebody might use it. And finally, you've got dip, which is a dip to whatever color you program. Now we're back on the ATEM. Wow. And you've got your duration control, so you can do half a second, or you can do a 2-second fade. or in this case dip. We'll turn that back to mix, and we'll go back to cut, because those crossfades, look, that don't impress me much. Up here you've got picture-in-picture. There are a couple quirks that you should know here. You can define where you want your picture-in-picture to be, upper left, lower right, upper right. We're going to put it in the lower right. Picture-in-picture will always pull from, the tiny picture will always pull from feed 1, which is fine. That's totally cool. The quirky thing is that as I was clicking around, it turns off picture-in-picture as you cut between cameras 2, 3, and 4. So you don't get to keep yourself up. There might be a way to switch this. I haven't dug too deep into the software controls, and if there is, I will post a little text block here that says I was wrong. I have no trouble admitting I was wrong. I love being wrong, especially about quirky things that bug me. And finally, on the right, you've got fade to black, which, you guessed it, a 2-second fade to black. Hey, come back me. There we are. Fantastic. Turn off picture-in-picture. Moving over, you won't really be able to see this on the final edit that we do, because this all goes to video out. Right now what we have is the monitor viewer, and that's MV. You can switch your video out to program, whatever your main video is, or 1, 2, 3, cameras 1, 2, 3, and 4. I leave it on monitor view because you don't just get your 4 cameras and your preview and program, you also get your audio levels, if your record function is working, if your stream is working, and what software you've got loaded, or what still you've got loaded in your media. Up here we have key on and off. I don't have that set up, so I can't demo that. We've got record and stop. You'll see that the record is red. That means it's engaged. And if I were to press stop, well, you'd know it because this video would end. And finally, we've got on air and off for our stream. So when you have your ATEM set up to be streaming, you just tap on air and it'll start broadcasting against your stream key, which, as we say in the industry, a technical term, that's biggity banging. So those are your basic functions on your ATEM, and if you look over at the software, you'll see a lot of the same functions plus many, many more. So let's just go over this. We're going to turn on picture-in-picture just to flex because we can, but let's take a look at what we've got over here. And we've got some heightened functionality over here. So we've got our program cameras, cam 1, cam 2, cam 3, and cam 4. But we also have our preview cameras, and something you can do in the software that you can't do on the ATEM Mini Pro is load up your next camera in preview before you do the cut and check to make sure that that's the camera you want. If you are live editing your own thing, you won't really need this, but if you plan to do live editing professionally, study this, because it is absolutely standard that your director will call the preview camera and then cut to that camera. Preview camera 1, cut to camera 1. Preview camera 3, cut to camera 3. So you should learn how to use that if you plan to go beyond your own personal workflow. I'm doing my own I'm the director and the switcher, so I don't have to call out previews, and I don't need to use that feature. So it's totally fine that it's not included on the actual device, because it's generally assumed that the person who's running this device will be the person directing. This is for smaller productions. So it absolutely makes sense that they would not include that functionality on the device. This is a Mini. This is not a full-blown ATEM. And then you've got all these other ding-dong buttons that you want. You've got your dips and your wipes and your swipes, and you can do your own little dilly-dally dolly dib-dab, except that nothing is happening because I have my preview camera set to camera 4, so let's switch that to camera 2. And now we can do a transition between camera 4 and camera 2. We'll leave that as is. Next over, you've got your media pool. You can load up all of your stills in here and have them ready for that still button. Haven't gotten there yet. Not that interested in that. We might use it someday, but as we're just doing podcasts where we chit-chat, it's not absolutely vital that we have a JPEG ready to go. I use a totally different workflow that we'll cover at the end of this video for adding graphics, and it works really well, and I encourage you to experiment with it if you're on a Mac, and if not, you can find a reasonable substitute. Now here's where we get into some real sexiness that I actually very, very much love, and I'm glad they included it. You have volume up and down controls when you're working with the ATEM Mini. Hey, let's turn that picture-in-picture back on. You have volume controls if you're just using the ATEM Mini, but if you get into the software control, you have much, much, much more robust controls. So you've got your input control as well as your volume control on the audio coming in, which is good because without that, when we were doing our initial tests with this thing, we were clipping very badly. There was this tiny sweet spot that we could exist in where the signal was loud enough that we weren't getting any of the floor noise. We didn't have to amplify it in post and bring up the floor noise from the Zoom. But it was so close to the noise ceiling that we were, if the co-host and I spoke at the same time, we would get massive clipping, just really, really bad clipping. And it limited our dynamics. We couldn't speak softly and then speak loudly. We could only speak at this middle range. So by bringing down the input volume quite a bit, almost 20 decibels, a good solid negative 18 decibels there, we were able to nullify the effects of that. Now see how annoying that is? I just wanted to show you the ATEM Mini Pro for but a moment, and then when I cut back to the software, the picture-in-picture was gone and I had to turn it back on manually. I'm hoping that there's a way to turn that off. I would love it if it was just ignorance on my part. But anyway, within the software, you can turn down the input volume and then do expanding, noise gates, compressors, and limiters to kill. You can minimize the noise floor by getting a good level to begin with, and then you can further minimize that the low-end hiss. I mean, it's very low end, but it still exists when you're coming out of, we're running an analog signal. If you turn the picture-in-picture back on, we're running from like a mini plug from headphones from the line out of the Zoom into the ATEM Mini Pro. So there's just going to be some noise on there. It's not criminal. It's not a bad thing. It's a fact of nature that when you've got, we're going analog from mic to digital on the Zoom to analog out back to digital, you're going to get some noise in there. But anyway, as you can hear, we've minimized it. This is no post-processing outside of what's being done in the ATEM software controller. The audio sounds fine. It's very clean, very crisp. I'm extremely happy with the higher functionality that you get in the software that you can't get just on the surface of the ATEM Mini Pro. Finally, on the right, we've got camera control, which is basically not particularly useful because all I've got are I've got GoPros plugged in. If we had multiple Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras, that would be a completely different story. You've got so much higher functionality in this camera control, but we don't, so that's that. All right, we've talked about what the device is and how all of it, like what you can do with it. Let's go to the wide shot and talk a little bit about plugging everything in and getting it all set up. So how the ATEM Mini works, how the ATEM Mini Pro works is it will take your first signal and then upscale, downscale, re-res every other signal to match that one. This is one of the things I didn't know that the device could do. The early models of the ATEM Mini, not the Pro version, you would have to, as I understand, match all of your cameras. So if you were running 4 GoPros that were all outputting at 60p, you'd plug them in at 1080 resolution, 60 frames per second. You'd just plug them all in and they'd all work together and that would be beautiful. But if you were using a GoPro at 1080 60p and a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera at 24p and a Canon 5D Mark III, which I'm not sure what that, I think that's an export, that HDMI out is at 30, maybe 60 if you're at 1280 by 720 resolution. Anyway, it became this whole mess of trying to match all of your footage, that you'd have to run everything through a standardizer, a decimator, or something like that to make sure it all matched up by the time it got to the ATEM. Now, those days are over because I had a computer plugged in, 2 GoPros, or 1 GoPro, a Canon 5D, and a Blackmagic, all inputting at different resolutions, or maybe, I don't know, because it didn't matter. They all were upscaled and standardized to 1080 60p, and you could cut between them very, very easily. We're on 3 GoPros right now, so it's super easy to cut between them anyway. But this thing does standardize your footage, which is very, very cool. That's what I wanted to talk about. We've got everything going into the ATEM, but we haven't talked about the outputs yet. what's going on with the things on the far right. So let's go back to the ATEM, and we've talked about audio. We've talked about the 4 HDMIs coming in, but we haven't talked about these 4 things. Well, the one on the far right is very, very easy. There's not much to say about that. That's the plug. Whoopee. Over here, what we have is the HDMI out, and the HDMI out is running to an Atomos Assassin, and I use that as the monitor. I'm not recording with it. I could be recording with it. Let me see if I can bring up... And we're back. I guess it would have been just as easy to put a hard drive into the Atomos and press record, but instead I turned to the GoPro upside down. So we're going to take a look at what we've got going on here. The HDMI is coming out from the ATEM Mini Pro and going into the Atomos Assassin. What we've got in the upper left is your preview. Upper right, program, 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras, and then left to right, we've got the media player, the stream information, the recording information, and your audio levels. You'll see that these guys are hot, these guys are brightened, because we're actually recording them. Left to right, you'll see that the camera microphones are showing the audio signal, but they're all darkened because we aren't recording them. We could turn them on, and it would light them up, and it would look like this, and it would sound like that. So we're going to turn them right back off to avoid tormenting you. So you do not need an external monitor as you're using this. You can actually be cutting without looking at what you're doing, just going between cameras 1, 2, 3, and 4. I like to have a monitor because I like to see what I'm shooting and editing. And that is what that looks like. Moving back over to the ATEM, we've got these two guys. First is a USB-C port, and the other is an Ethernet. Now, the USB-C port can serve 2 functions. The first one, the one that I'm using it for right now, is to record the feed. So we've got this plugged into an SSD, and it is recording there, and we'll just pop this off. It will be an H.264 render of this entire video, and we can upload it directly. We could have uploaded it directly to YouTube if I didn't have to do that cut, but here we are. I will have to do some editing on this after we're done recording. And finally, we've got not yet. The other thing that you can do with the USB-C port is plug it into the computer and use the software control on the USB-C port. If you want to use the USB-C for recording your stream, you can do that, which is what we're doing now, and you can also use the Ethernet port to plug into the computer, which is what we're doing. It does take a little minute longer for the software controller to find Ethernet feeds than it does for USB-C feeds, but it does find them eventually, and you get full control of the device from there. All right, and that should cover it for the ATEM Mini Pro, the basics of understanding the front panel, a quick overview of the software, a look at how you can organize your workflow for a multicam shoot, and how you can prepare yourself for live switching and recording your feed as you broadcast. The functionality of this device is through the roof. I think about a year ago what was available on the market, and none of it comes close. When you're talking price points, it's a joke what we were working with a year ago. I think about the live switching I was doing 5 years ago, and this would have been a pipe dream. Like, this was just not on the radar at all. The limited functionality, the limited audio functionality on the device is a bit of a meh. I'm not thrilled with the on-device audio functionality, but they scooped it back up on the actual software, so it's a kind of no harm, no foul thing. You should assume that you're going to be doing your fine-tuning in the software, not on the actual device. But once you have it set up, once you understand what you want to be doing with it and how to best do it, you do have a lot of under-the-hood controls that might not be available to you or obvious at first on the face of the device. So between the audio and the picture-in-picture, and that picture-in-picture thing, the thing about that, why I don't even want it to be a complaint, because first of all, it might be ignorance on my part, in which case, shame on me. Second, it's something that I believe could easily be fixed with a software patch, and if there's one thing we learned about Blackmagic in the last year, it's that they done love some software patches. They've been dropping software patches left, right, and center for all of their devices with not even just like minor bug fixes, but major functionality being implemented down the road regularly. It's really incredible the work they're doing, and the price point can't be beat. Good luck finding one, though. These are hard to come by, but once you have one, I think you'll be very, very happy with how it works, especially if you know how to use it. I will continue to make videos that dive deeper into the functionality of this device and other Blackmagic devices, all the other devices that we're using to broadcast, to give you an idea of what you might need to build your projects. As always, likes are great, comments are great, subscriptions are great, notifications, blah, 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 all that stuff, whatever. The main thing I would ask is if you have any questions about the gear that we're talking about workflow, about implementing different experimentational gear into your own workflow, please, 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 just jump down below and ask those questions. I've been doing this stuff for decade and a half, and there's like, what do you call it? And in the words of Amanda Bynes in She's the Man, I got a lifetime of knowledge. So please just jump in with the questions and I'll do my best to answer them. And if I don't know them, I will say I don't know. Thank you for tuning in. I got a boogie. I'm getting hungry. It's dinner time over here. Bye.